Hi everyone, and welcome back to It's a Chore Thing. Today I'm going to bring you along and show you how I made these adorable farmhouse pumpkins using items that I purchased at the dollar store. This project was super simple and would be a great project to do with kids. So without further ado, let's just get into this video. For this project you'll need Mod Podge, some jute string, a screwdriver, a sponge for the Mod Podge, a sheet of sandpaper, and 3 sheets of scrapbook paper. I picked these up at Hobby Lobby for $1, and I chose 2 wood finish looks as well as a buffalo plaid check. And you'll also need 3 different sized pumpkins that I purchased at the Dollar Tree. I decided to go with a large metal one, a medium faux chalkboard looking one, and a smaller wooden decorative one. To begin, I start with the large metal pumpkin and cut off the string that was attached at the top and carefully moved the metal leaf out of the way so that it doesn't get damaged in the process of working on it. I then apply a thin layer of Mod Podge all over the top of the pumpkin, leaving the stem free of any Mod Podge. Once I had my thin layer down, I placed my 12 by 12 piece of scrapbook paper right on top and made sure that the entire pumpkin was covered and smoothed it out to make sure that there were no air pockets or wrinkles. Then I set it aside to dry and moved on to work on the next pumpkin. For the next pumpkin, I again started by cutting off the string at the top, then used the screwdriver to carefully remove the raffia bow and the glue that was used to keep it in place. Once I had those removed, I used a piece of sandpaper to smooth out the area that came up when I removed the glue so that the surface was smooth, and then I used the sandpaper to sand the paint off of the attached leaf. I just removed the surface paint and didn't worry too much about the paint that was left in the creases of the vines. And just a note of caution, you do have to be a little gentle with the leaf because it is really thin and it bent so easily. So I had to make sure that I kept it intact. Once I was finished sanding, I wiped the entire pumpkin off with a clean towel to make sure that I removed any dust or paint and that I had a clean surface to work with. Then I applied my thin layer of Mod Podge to the front and applied my next sheet of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. Again, making sure that the entire area was covered and smoothed out to make sure any wrinkles or air pockets weren't hiding. And then just as with the previous pumpkin, I set that aside so that I could give it time to dry and set up, and I moved on to the third pumpkin. For the last one, I started by using my screwdriver to carefully remove the attached sunflower and raffia bow. Then I just peeled off the burlap overlay that was on top, and it came off pretty easily, but as I got to the area where it was attached to the base, I noticed that it was glued on there pretty good. So I had to go get my craft knife to cut along the base to separate the attached burlap. Then I just used some sandpaper to lightly sand the front of the pumpkin where the burlap was attached to make sure that there wasn't any residual glue or glitter left behind, and to make sure that the entire surface was smooth. And again, I used a towel to wipe everything down to ensure that the entire work surface was clean. And just as I did with the other two pumpkins, I applied a thin layer of Mod Podge to the front and placed a sheet of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper, again making sure that the entire area was covered and then smoothing it out and setting it aside to dry. Once all three of the pumpkins have dried and the Mod Podge has set up, you can go in and cut off all the excess paper from around the pumpkins. You don't have to be exact with this. I just tried to get as close as I could while still leaving just a little bit of an edge around each pumpkin. And I'll show you how to clean that up in just a second. After trimming off all the excess paper, I'm going to go in with a piece of sandpaper and sand the edges of the pumpkins to get the edges and the paper to all blend together. And the trick to this is to sand from the front of the paper to the back. And that not only creates a clean cut on the paper, it also creates a smooth blended edge as well. And again, you're going to want to do this to all three of the pumpkins. Once I sanded and blended all the edges, I wiped everything down and then go in with some white paint to just paint all the edges around each pumpkin. Once the edges were done, I used a very dry brush with very little paint on it to just brush the front of each pumpkin right along the edges. And you want to make sure that you use a very light hand with this part, because once it is dry, we will be sanding them down lightly, and you don't want to run the risk of ripping your paper if the paint is too thick. Next, I took some jute string and used some hot glue to secure it around the stem of each pumpkin. realized that I really didn't like the look of the base to the small pumpkin since the original color was brown. So I decided to paint it black to match the redone pumpkin and set it aside to dry. Next, I took a harvest sign that came from a package of 3 from the dollar store and added some hot glue to the long areas of the back and attached it to my large metal pumpkin. Then I attached the small pumpkin back onto its original base, and since I can't leave well enough alone, I decided to add some more jute string around the edges of the medium-sized pumpkin. I just thought it would add a little something extra to it. Finally, I added 2 small pieces of scrap wood to the back of the 2 larger pumpkins so that they would stand nicely wherever I decided to place them. And here is how they turned out, and I just love these pumpkins. I love how neutral they are, and the overall farmhouse look that they have is just too cute. And I think they're going to look good in any area of my home, but to be honest, they will most likely just end up on my bookcase along with my other fall decor. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, be sure to hit that red subscribe button before you leave. And as always, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you all in the next one.